Namaste, dear Vedanta family. The much awaited Science of Success talks by Mrs. Jaya Rao are nearing soon. With insights from Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, Jayaji will share the 6 C's of success, a practical formula for inner growth and happiness. We encourage you to spread the knowledge and transform lives. We will share the invite to the talks on the WhatsApp community after today's class. Forward the invite to your family and friends to amplify the message and create a better society. If you are not a part of the community yet, click the link in the description box to join. Together, let's show Bangalore the power of purpose driven living. I now request Jayaji to continue with chapter 2.
ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Any questions? Yeah. 1 minute.
So while we are working towards our goal, we are so focused and we want to ensure that we reach it. Then we get attached in front of the goal. This leads to a lot of disappointment and will break at times. I understand there's a thin line between, to work as hard as your life depends on it, but give up that desire for the food. And I'm finding it very difficult to do it. So you can help me.
Okay. Your question is that we have been talking about fixing a goal, working hard towards it. Work as if your life depends on it. And yet be unconcerned with the result. Right? This is what you're finding difficult because as you go along, you get attached to the goal itself. And when you don't achieve it, it causes pain. Correct? This is your question. Now, if you analyze, what we are saying is that the intellect should fix the goal. And work hard, work consistently, work with all your being towards achieving that goal. But your objective actually is to become a better person. While achieving that goal could be a material goal that you want to be chairman of a company. That goal may be an unselfish goal that you want to work for the nation or for the environment, or whatever it be. Or it could be self-realization. Whatever be the goal, as long as your intellect is functioning, you will be out of trouble. You will not get attached. It will not bother you whether you achieve the goal or not. Because you know that as long as you consistently, continuously, wholeheartedly work hard, you will achieve the goal at some point in time. You may not achieve it now. See, you have fixed a particular time frame. You may not achieve it then. You may achieve it sometime in future, but you will achieve it. See, take for example, the Indian independence movement started in which year? Correct, 1857. From 1857 to 1947, they were failures. They failed at it because we didn't get independence. In fact, they were killed. all the people who worked for independence were caught and killed. They lost their lives. But it didn't matter because they were working for the country. And at some point in future, the result will come, which it came. We may not be alive to see it, but it will be achieved because you have started the ball rolling. Someone else will take it forward, right? So you use your intellect to fix a goal and work, and then you find fulfillment in the work itself. And that purifies you because you're not working with a selfish desire, you're not working with selfish intent, you're working for a higher cause. So you get purified of desire. You're fulfilled in the performance of the action itself. You get it? Then whether you achieve the fruit or not, it doesn't matter. See, we are working. Our goal is to take the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita to every home in India, in the world. And how many people are sitting here? I should be the most depressed person. But it doesn't work like that. Because you understand that the goal is difficult. It's difficult for people to relate to it. There are so many temptations out there, so many things that distract you. So in the midst of all that, to make yourself available for the Bhagavad Gita is a difficult task. Plus, this is an intellectual approach, which among the people who are interested in spirituality, a handful are interested in Vedanta. So when you understand that, intellectually assess it, you have no you have no unreasonable expectations, right? So that's fine. If you take a look at the world, the best people were not even recognized during their lifetime. Well, after their death, suddenly people woke up and said, oh, here was a great man. So it is Oliver Goldsmith, for instance, an outstanding poet. What poetry he's written. He didn't have the money to pay rent for his apartment, and his landlady threw him out. What a tragedy. So the best of people, the best of painters, the best of authors, the best musicians died unrecognized. Because human nature is such that they understand only mediocrity. See, now Coldplay gives a concert, there will be 50,000 people there. You know what Coldplay is? Bhagavad Gita, 5 people won't be sitting. That is the proportion. So similarly, when you embark on a goal that is worthwhile, that is subtle, that is something that a common person doesn't relate to, doesn't have the capacity to relate to. Because most people are gross. They don't have that vision. So if you happen to be working in that field, you understand. And nobody will understand.
That is a problem also when you get influenced, a lot of people are not working, others are like thinking about small like their goal and they're doing something like this. So in that way, you also feel sometimes what are you doing is correct. That comes in a big way.
So in short, don't look for appreciation, don't look for acknowledgement, don't look for praise, don't look for the result. Just work. And find fulfillment in the work. Okay? So, verse 56.
दुःखेष्वनुद्विग्नमनाः सुखेषु विगतस्पृहः वीतरागभयक्रोधः स्थितधीर्मुनिरुच्यते.
One is said to be a Muni, rooted in wisdom, when one's mind is not perturbed by sorrow, nor does one yearn for joy. One is free from desire, fear, and anger. So, in this verse, he is answering the question, Kim Asita, means how does he sit? You remember the question in verse 54? Arjuna asks, what sthita prajnasya ka bhasha? What is the definition, description of a sthita prajna, of a realized soul? Then he says, Sthitadhi kim prabhasheta? How does he speak? Kim asita? How does he sit? Kim vrajeta? How does he walk? Right? So now he is answering Kim asita? How does he sit? Means when you sit, you're with yourself, you're not contacting people. So the question is, what is happening inside him? Ordinary people, you know what is happening. You're manipulating. You're thinking how to make money. You're thinking how to get maximum out of you. Like this morning we were discussing, two of us were discussing, how in the world everybody is greedy. Everyone is looking for how to get a better deal out of you, whoever you're contacting. How to reduce my cost. How to pass on my expenditure to somebody else. Nobody thinks in any discussion, nobody thinks, how much more can I give you? How much, not just give you, donate to a cause. Even there you think of how to extract money, how to reduce my cost. Life is not about that. As you develop the subtlety of thinking, you understand that, anyway, it's a question of what is happening inside you. Now, here is a man of realization. Here is a person who has reached that state of entitlement. Here is a person who has reached the state of enlightenment, where he is complete, fulfilled, totally fulfilled. What does he think? What's going on inside? This is the question. So, now the problem with us is that we get affected. The problem is not with the joy and sorrow that comes from outside. The problem is with our affectation, our dependence. So there are three kinds of living beings: plant, animal, human. Plant, for all practical purposes, we assume have no feelings, no emotions. Animals have tremendous emotions. Cows have a great deal of emotion. Dolphins have, horses have, dogs of course have. But all the animals have one thing in common. Number one, they act on the emotion. And number two, they are affected by the emotion. Let's take the example of a dog. The master leaves the dog alone at home and goes to work. The dog is heartbroken. You can't have a dialogue with the dog and say, "Arey, every day I go and every day I come back. Where is the need to feel heartbroken?" Dog doesn't understand that. And when you go back home, the dog is overjoyed. How does the dog greet you? He wags his tail furiously, his whole body is shaking. When you come, he jumps on you, he bites you, he licks you, he does all kinds of things. You are as happy as the dog is. But do you express it like that? I hope not. You're calming the dog down. You say, okay, relax. The human being has much more emotion than any animal. What subtle emotion we can have. And they say the emotion that you have should be such that tears well up in your eyes, up to here. but never fall over. If you don't have tears, it means you're an indifferent person. If they fall over, you actually cry, you're a stupid person. You're affected. But if they come up to here and you swallow them, you're a real human being. Means we are designed to have tremendous emotion but act on the sane counsel of the intellect. And we are designed to be completely unaffected by it. Like Oliver Goldsmith said, to them his heart, his love, his griefs were given. The village preacher, he describes how does he relate with the simple, innocent village folk. To the villagers, to them his heart, his love, his griefs were given. But all his serious thoughts had rest in heaven. And then he gives a metaphor as some tall cliff that lifts its awful form, swells from the vale, from the valley, and swells from the valley, and then, though round its breast the rolling clouds are spread, eternal sunshine settles on its head. The beauty of a human being is to have tremendous emotion, but that the clouds should be at heart level. The head, the intellect, should always be in touch with the sun means Atman. So that is the question you are asking, how not to get affected. When your intellect is anchored in the higher, your mind feels, but you are not affected. So this is the outstanding quality of a human being. How many of us live up to that? In the poem called Laodamia by Wordsworth, Protesilaus is the Greek hero, young, brave. He goes to war and there is always fighting going on between the Greeks and the Trojans. So there's a prophecy that says that the first Greek who lands on Trojan soil will be killed. So the Greeks go in their ships. And as they approach the Trojan soil, the generals are having a discussion whom to send first. Because the first man who jumps on Trojan soil is going to get killed according to the prophecy. So they are in a quandary. Do we send a brave soldier that we lose a valuable fighter? We send an ordinary guy, they will say we are cowards. So as they're discussing, Protesilaus, who's just charged, he jumps, he fights valiantly, but as the prophecy says, he's killed. And his young widow, they've been married for only 3 months. She's heartbroken and she prays to God to give her husband back to him. She prays to God to give her husband back to her. And Jehovah is very impressed with her devotion. So says, okay, I'll give you your husband, but only for 3 hours. She doesn't listen to the rest. She sees his form and goes rushing to embrace him. But her hands meet and she's again heartbroken. Because obviously he's not for real. His spirit has been sent. And the whole poem is this wonderful conversation between Protesilaus, who truly loves her, and Laodamia, who's attached, totally attached. Attached means selfish love. See, now that Protesilaus is gone, why is she heartbroken? Because she wants her husband back. It's a selfish thing. If she views it from his point of view, it was his choice. He wanted to go, let him go. Then there's no grief. And actually, it's strange that you want to pull a person back. He's gone. He's moved on. Why are you holding him back? Let go. That letting go is pure love. Hanging on and saying, I want you back, is attachment, is selfishness. It's foolishness. So he tells her, be taught, O faithful consort, to control rebellious passion. For the gods approve the depth, not the tumult of the soul. A fervent but not ungovernable law. And then he tells her, learn by a mortal yearning. You have this attachment to me, but with this learn to ascend, seeking a higher object. Love was given, sanctioned, encouraged, chiefly for that end, that self might be annulled. What a wonderful way of looking at things. And mind you, he's not even a Vedantin. He's just a thinker. So it proves that anyone who thinks will arrive at the same conclusion. You know? It's a fabulous concept that we only understand two states. We understand indifference, where you don't care. And with most people, we are like, I don't care what happens to you. Or it is attachment, selfishness, clinging. Like a monkey clings to the offspring. You know how much? Even when the infant dies, the monkey still clings. When the worms start eating the infant's body, it still clings. Only when the worms start eating the mother's body does she give up. This is sickening attachment which all of us have. So when it is pointed out like that, you rebel. Even in this poem, Laodamia, in that conversation with him, as she gets attached, Jehovah, the God, understands and puts this horrid black color on his face, and she recoils in terror. So she's detached. Then again, slowly things are okay, so she's getting attached again. Again, he throws like black ink on his face. He looks ugly, and she goes back, withdraws. This is our life. Take a look at our relationships. When things are okay, slowly get to attachment. Then something goes wrong. You recoil. You withdraw. Again you go. Wait.
Very comfortable. So how do you know that you're attached? I mean, it's a given that you're attached, but to what extent?
This is an interesting question. So the question is, when both people are equally attached and you're comfortable, because there is no imbalance there, then how do you know you're attached? Yes, by and large you will be comfortable, but there will always be difference of opinion. There will always be the pain of the person not being there. So you can't be clinging to each other all the time. There will be some time when you are separate. So when you separate, the pain will come. So you miss the person when the person is not there. And when the person is there, you start taking the person for granted. So you don't really enjoy the person's company when he or she is there. It's only when the person is not there that you miss. So this is a sign of attachment. The missing is the sign of attachment.
To the extent you miss, you are attached.
100%. You know? So a detached person is in the present, wherever he is. So if the person is not there, he's happy. Person is there, he's happy.
So last time we spoke about paripurna feeling of fully understanding fully, and then we also control desire and intellect. These two things.
Yeah.
Paripurna also.
So the question is, Last time we spoke of the concept of paripurna, of being totally fulfilled, of understanding that you are full. And so when you're full, desire doesn't come. What we said, we got to the bottom of it and analyzed, where does desire come from? How does desire come? Desire comes, remember we took a look at food. When your stomach is empty, your thoughts will go to an object called food. The desire for food comes when there is an emptiness. When you have just eaten, even if another person suggests food, you reject it because you can't associate with food because you're already full. Similarly, all of us are haunted by this sense of emptiness, a void, something missing, which is there from the time we are born till the time we die. Now, even when it is there, Vedanta tells us, the Bhagavad Gita tells us that you are actually not empty. You're full. But for some reason, you don't know it. And this ignorance of your fullness creates desires, creates the void. And out of that void comes thought flow that goes out into the world to obtain an object of being with the idea of filling this void. But the problem is, we have fulfilled many desires. We have obtained many things from the world. But still that emptiness does not go, it does not reduce, it remains the same. So we should ask the question, why? Like if there's a tank and you fill it with water, it fills, right? Here it seems to be a bottomless pit. It just goes on and on. And the Bhagavad Gita explains why it is so. Because you can fill a real void. If that void is imaginary, you can never fill it. So, what must we do? This is what we discussed last time. What must we do? As we go through our lives, fulfilling desires, please go ahead and fulfill as many desires as you want. But suggest to yourself, every time you fulfill a desire, every time the desire comes up in your mind, tell yourself powerfully, I am full. I really don't need this. Buy it. Obtain it. Don't frustrate yourself. But keep telling yourself, I'm full, I'm full, I'm full. That is why we end with that prayer. It's a very powerful prayer which says, that is full, means Brahman, God is full, infinite. This world is also infinite. And when this infinite is taken out of that infinite, what remains there is not zero. What is it? Also infinite. So in short, once you reach that state of infinity, nothing can be taken away from you.
How do you control the desire with the intellect?
Yeah. How do you control the desires with the intellect? The intellect first must examine the desire and say, do I really need it? Can I postpone it? It's like the thought comes to you, my car has had a few scratches and dents and things, and I've had it for a few years. I want to buy a new car. So immediately the intellect should come in and say, does this really warrant a new car? Because a new car will cost so much. Do I have the resources? This car is good enough. If only I can repair the dents and the scratches and give it a nice paint, and maybe maybe it will become as good as new. And the engine is running. So it's like the intellect analyzes and arrives at a conclusion. So the conclusion may be that no, I can continue, I can postpone buying the new car by 2 or 3 years. Or it could be that the situation is such that you need to buy a new car. So when you use the intellect, there is some method in the madness. Otherwise, I'll tell you the case of a guy in Delhi bought a brand new, what car was that? I don't know, some luxury car he bought. And within 3 months, decided he did not want it. Luxury car, what do they cost now? A Mercedes will cost 70 lakhs. 70 lakhs he has spent on this car. He's used it for 3 months. He says, I'm bored with it. He dispenses with it and buys another brand new car. This is no method in the madness. This is just total madness. Even if you have that kind of money, does it warrant buying another new car after 3 months? It's as good as new. That's what happens. And often we do that. May not be with a luxury car like that, but with ordinary things. I'm bored with this. So you must take into consideration not just whether you can afford it or not, the impact it has on the environment. I read somewhere that an average American buys 50 sets of clothes every year, 50. This may seem small, this may not seem a great deal, but this is the average, which means the high-end people, the people on top, are buying like 200, 300 sets of clothes. For every set of clothes that you buy, look at the amount of water that goes into it, the dyes that go into it, which are toxic, the electricity that goes into it. It is huge. So it's not just about whether I can afford to buy or not. Okay?
When we say I imagine this void, the void is imaginary.
Wait.
When we say I imagine this void, the void is imaginary. Is it the mind or the intellect or which part of me is imaginary? And then the intellect comes in and I reassure myself that I am full.
No, it's not like that. It's not that you are imagining a void. You don't know that you are full. It is ignorance of your fullness. It's like, for example, let's say the son of a billionaire gets separated. The parents go to some, like Disney for instance, and in that rush, many people there, the child gets separated from the parents. And they look all around for the child, they can't find. And that child grows up as a beggar on the streets. And the parents are searching. The father never gives up. The parents don't give up. They keep searching. 20 years later, somehow they find him at a traffic light. And he's injured or not well or something. And this couple goes to help him. They bring him home and they take him to the hospital for some tests and things like that. And the suspicion arises because the doctors ask a few questions. The suspicion arises that maybe this is our son. So it's then confirmed that he is their son. Now, in these 20 years that he did not know he was their son, he was still a billionaire, right? But he did not know he was a billionaire. So it's not mind or intellect, it's just ignorance. Ignorance is vasana, it goes beyond mind and intellect. So you're full, you don't know you're full, and in this ignorance, in this environment of ignorance, you think you are empty. You experience an emptiness. And that in that emptiness, physics also says, nature abhors vacuum. So wherever there is emptiness, forces come to fill that emptiness, void. That is your thought. Thought currents go out into the world consistently. All the time thoughts are going out into the world, looking for avenues to grab. That is why we're greedy. Grab this, grab that. The irony is we are full. So how can you feel an already full thing? That's the thing.
Thoughts get absorbed. But as the day passes, you don't feel what you have studied sometimes. Your energy drops. But a realized person feels this all the time. So how can we match that?
The question is, in the morning when you study this subject, you feel energetic, dynamic, enthusiastic. But as the day wears off, you lose that enthusiasm and you are back to your mundane existence. Whereas a man of realization, a person of realization, maintains that all the time. So how do you get there is the question. See, what results in energy levels going down is selfishness, ego, anxiety, worry, stress. All of this the realized person does not have. So primarily it is selfishness, desire and ego that cause this huge loss of energy. To the extent you improve or to the extent you evolve spiritually, to that extent you will be that much more energetic. See, you will notice, now we are meeting in the evening, right? The whole day you've been doing something or the other, you've been working. And just before coming to class, you may have felt tired. You may have even considered not coming. But somehow you came. The short time that we spend here, what happens? At least for these few minutes, you're not thinking of self. You're thinking of these ideas. What happens? By the time the class ends, you're energetic. Don't you experience that? That is proof. And this will continue to happen till you reach realization. That is why we say daily study of the Bhagavad Gita is absolute must. You can do without food. You can live for a day happily without water. You can do without anything else in the world. But this you can't do without. It's like oxygen. Can you live without oxygen? No. Similarly, you can't live without these ideas. And therefore, we tell you to get the Bhagavad Gita. It is available on pen drives. Listen to it, watch it. The video is much better because it holds your attention. And after you've watched it or listened to it, or as you're listening, make a note of important points that have struck you. Like this: what drains you of energy? Selfishness. Make a note of it and think about it. Because there are moments when you are not selfish. The thought of self goes away when you're inspired with something. And see how you feel then. Feel energetic, enthusiastic. Then it goes, oh, you're back to your bored self and boring self. Anybody who looks at your face also will get bored because you're carrying that boredom around with you. Right? So once you reflect over it, you think about it, find a goal and work. Work with enthusiasm, work with excitement. Look what's happened. You know, this Kumbh Mela is going on. Look at the number of people who have gone there. They take a dip in this freezing ice cold water. It's amazing. And in all these years, this Kumbh Mela is the first in 144 years. It happens only once in 144 years. The spirit with which people come, even a person who is a complete atheist who goes there only as a tourist, as a press correspondent, comes back a believer. I actually met a lady who told me last time, not this 144, none of us were alive the last time, but the previous Kumbh Mela. And she said, I went a non-believer, I came back believer. So this is what happens when you're free from selfishness, even for a short while. You achieve the impossible. What has happened here is amazing. So if you're able to sustain it, by God, you'll get there. That's all there is. And when people talk about it, you see, the problem is we view everything from the viewpoint of our selfishness. So when somebody says, read the Bhagavad Gita, you think, oh, maybe she wants to sell the book. Maybe she wants to make money out of it. That's a very cheap way of looking at it. Even if it is true, even if the other person is wanting to say, you remain free now. You remain pure. You'll achieve. Okay? So, this is it. And then he says, free from desire, which comes from emptiness. We've seen this. And you have to constantly tell yourself, I'm Purna, not Shunya. We think we're Shunya. Shunya means zero. I'm not Shunya, I'm Purna. And then desire, when it is fulfilled, there is fear of losing it. Because everywhere people are talking. And there are videos now that appear on social media about how parents should not give anything to their children while they're alive. There's fear. Maybe my own son will take away my wealth or my whatever it is. And when the desire is obstructed, there's anger. So you have a desire for a particular thing. Let's say you want to bag a contract in business, or you want a client, and someone else comes and takes him away. Your thought current that's going towards that person or that contract gets deflected towards the obstruction as anger. So you can never be angry unless there is an underlying desire. You must analyze. The moment you get angry, you blame the other person. Isn't it? Stupid idiot, you are the cause of my anger. Anger can never come unless I have a desire. So that person is not the cause of my agitation. I should look, what desire do I have that has been obstructed? And then you'll remain calm, peaceful. So the solution is you must gain knowledge of your fullness. And the only source of this knowledge is the Bhagavad Gita. Yes, the Upanishads are there, but I can't think of a more comprehensive source, one book, that deals with every kind of human being, every kind of problem that you have, and takes you from basics to the highest, like the Bhagavad Gita. This is our wealth, friends. This we've inherited. How can you give it up? It's like walking away from $1 billion that your father has left you. What would you call such a person? Utter fool. PhD in foolery. And what do you think of us? There is infinite knowledge, infinite prosperity, infinity lying there, waiting for us to inherit and take it out. And we are not interested. What are we running after? People who take peanuts from us and exaggerate it and present it very nicely. We pay $10,000, $20,000 and go there to pick it up. How foolish can you get? So, gain knowledge of your fullness and manage desire, like you said, with your intellect. If you do these two things, you're well on your way. Next verse, 57.
यः सर्वत्रानभिस्नेहः तत्तत्प्राप्य शुभाशुभम् नाभिनन्दति न द्वेष्टि तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता.
Yaha and Sarvatra. These are the two words Yaha he uses throughout the Bhagavad Gita. Yaha means whoever, one who. He says this. One is established in wisdom when one is everywhere, Sarvatra, unattached, neither elated at obtaining good nor vexed with evil. So, Yaha means whoever you are. There are no qualifications. There is nothing that keeps people away from gaining this knowledge. Everywhere else you go, you have to get qualifying marks, no? You want to get entry into a good college, you have to have minimum marks. You want to get into medical college, engineering college, so don't talk. But here, everyone is accepted. As long as you're a human being, accepted. So now, when you read the previous two verses, 55 and 56, you would tend to think that here is a person who's just sitting around doing nothing. There's no activity, there's no dynamism suggested. And this is the general misconception that we have of spirituality, that oh, there is a person, useless guy who goes sits in the mountains and does nothing. No. Sarvatra is everywhere, dynamic, active. Like Krishna. Krishna was all over the place. He was dynamic, he was mischievous, he was active. Wherever he was needed, he was there. Before people could ask for him, he was there. Like, look at the situations from the ridiculous to the sublime. That Kalia came into the river, he was there to help. Incessant rain came, he held up the mountain and protected his people. Right up to the Mahabharata war. So, here is a person who is Sarvatra, but with a difference. We are also Sarvatra, we are running around. What is the difference? We get attached wherever we go. You take a holiday and go to Dubai for 2 weeks, you come back and say, I want to become resident in Dubai. Arre? You are attached. Somebody else goes to Singapore for 2 days and gets attached. America, so don't talk. Once you go there, yad gatva nanivartante, they don't return only. This is a horrible state of mind where, why do you get attached? Because you're not self-sufficient. The mind always wants to lean on something or the other. Total dependency. That, here it's completely different. He says, he's everywhere but unattached. We should learn this. First of all, understand the concept of detachment. It's difficult to even understand. And implementation is even more difficult. Because, see, you're attached, right? At the moment you think of detachment, you distance yourself from the person. I don't mean physical distance, mental. Mentally, you tend to distance yourself and become indifferent. That is a lower state. And then you suddenly pull yourself up and say, no, I'm getting indifferent. So you go back. And then before you know it, you're attached. So, the understanding itself is not that. When you are detached, unattached, then what happens? You're neither elated at obtaining good nor vexed with evil. So, again, the three living creatures, I have three types of living beings. Plant is indifferent. You know, if the plant's offspring, the seed dies, the plant doesn't sit there and cry. It's indifferent. In fact, there are plants who prevent the seed. If the seed falls near the tree, it will crush it. Animal, totally attached. It's so sad, now in the dairy industry and the meat industry, when the mother delivers a male calf, it is immediately taken away from her for the slaughter. And that mother cow is overcome with sorrow. There is a video of a mother who ran so many miles to save that infant. And when the driver realized that this is what the mother cow had done, he releases the infant in a rare occasion where he had some compassion. So that is the state of an animal. When the mate dies, it dies in grief. But when it comes to the human being has the capacity to be unattached, 100% self-sufficient. So there are 2 points here. Why does the Bhagavad Gita again and again and again tell us be detached, be detached, be detached? And we don't understand. Because the law is wherever you get attached, you suffer. Extreme suffering comes with attachment. And you must understand that. All our suffering, we are all suffering, right? Stems from one word, attachment. You drop it, you're happy. You're attached to money, you're attached to your car, you're attached to your home, you're attached to your carpet, you're attached to your kitchen, you're attached to your kitchen knife. How absurd can it get? And the more the devices you have and the more gadgets you have, greater is the attachment. So you suffer, you can't enjoy, and in the end you lose. You have a fancy car. Do you enjoy that car? If you're attached. No. Because you're constantly worried, oh, somebody will come and scratch it, then maybe I'll get a dent somewhere. And then, like a person I know in Delhi, he had a fleet of cars, luxury cars. Huge mansion, fleet of cars, every private aircraft, everything. But he goes and buys, in those days, an ordinary Maruti 800. His family members laughed at him. He said, you've got so many cars, why do you buy a Maruti 800? Because when I go to crowded streets, my BMW will get scratched and my Mercedes will get a dent. So fifth car was a Maruti 800. Can you imagine the absurdity of the situation? So you can never enjoy. You're a tormented person sitting in that car, you might as well now go by BST bus. Whatever happens to the bus you're free. No? And so, first thing is, don't get attached and suffer. Number 2, don't let external environment, external things disturb you. So, here you must understand what gets affected from the external world. The world is matter. Body, mind, intellect also matter. Matter will affect matter. So in other words, when it's cold outside like this, freezing water in the Mahakumbh, it will affect your body. When it's warm, your body is uncomfortable. That you can't prevent, that you can't help. But what you need to understand is, you are not body. How is it that these guys are able to go and take a dip 3 times a day for 40 days, isn't it? How is it they're able to do it? Because they're inspired at a higher level. So their identification shifts from body to spirit, Atman. Same thing with the mind. If someone's nasty to you, your mind will be hurt. But you need not be hurt. So it's like this, it's like if what you're wearing, your shirt tears, you can't go and check into a hospital and say, my shirt is torn. They will say, go to a mall and buy a new shirt. That's it. Huh? It's a similar thing. Mad body, mind, intellect are your vestures. It's like clothes. It's like the body is like the jacket, the mind is like the shirt, and the intellect is like your vest. Any of these 3 go, you simply replace it without your getting affected at all. You just move on. But the problem is, you have thought, the problem is, as you think, so you become. You have thought about body so much that whatever happens to the body happens to you. When you're cooking, you get a slight cut in your fingers, you sit there crying. Why? Total identification with the body. Same thing with the mind. Oh, someone said something rude to me when I was 5 years old. I don't even remember, but others told me, so I hang on to that. I will not talk to him. This is affectation. An intellect. Some years back, for the US visa application, a tourist visa, not any other, one question was asked, are you a communist? If you answered yes, God help you, you would never get a visa. How can you be so intolerant of, and there's supposed to be a democracy? You see? You must accept that people have different viewpoints, people have different convictions. That is the whole point in having freedom, right? So, it's like this, when you have a horseshoe magnet and bring a piece of iron to that magnet, what happens? It is attracted, influenced. Take away the iron piece, bring a piece of wood to the magnet does not have the power to influence the wood. Now do something interesting. Tie the 2 pieces together, iron and wood. Bring the combination to the magnet. What happens? It's attracted. But even when the combination is attracted, the wooden piece in that combination is still intact, uninfluenced, unaffected. It's pure. It's the same thing with us. The world is a powerful magnet that influences the body, mind, intellect. The body, mind, intellect is like the iron piece. But you are not body, mind, intellect. You are spirit, Atman. You have to keep repeating that to yourself. You have hypnotized yourself to believe your body, mind, intellect. You have to dehypnotize yourself. How do you do that? Whatever happens to body, mind, intellect, take it in your stride. Don't linger in that. It's like that poem, Even This Will Pass Away. He gets injured in war. And he says, what is pain? He says, day by day it will go away. You must just understand that. Whatever it is, one way or the other, it will go. Either the pain will go or you will go. But it will go. Don't linger there. That is the thing. So, you have to constantly pull back from body, mind, intellect. And it can't happen when you get affected. It must happen when things are all right. You get it? Now, when things are all right, you're thinking of, where do I go for a vacation? Which new restaurant has come where I can go eat? If you're thinking of all this, or which new car to buy, things like that, it doesn't work. I'm not saying don't buy. We're talking about the investment of your thought. It's not about what you do. You can go buy a 7-bedroom mansion, but your thoughts should be on the higher. You get it? And when thoughts are on the higher, the lower comes to you automatically. Why? Because you deserve it. So you must remember, you get what you deserve, not what you desire. You can desire the whole world. You will not get it. What you get is what you deserve. How to deserve? Think of Atman. And if you want proof, there can't be a greater proof than Prahlada, where the forces of nature bowed down to him. Fire refused to burn him. What greater power can you get? Look at what is happening in Los Angeles. Here in California, the world's most creative people, they're 50 years ahead of time and they're wealthy, the number of millionaires, billionaires there are so great. What happened with all that? The fire hits the billionaire's house as much as the poor person's home, right? And we all believe that security lies in money. Where is the security? With Atman. You become Prahlada. I wish I can tell this to the people of California. Become Prahlada and the fire will swallow up itself. Fire will go. That's the truth. It's an amazing thing. How with the power of your thoughts you can gain victory over nature. Think about it. Next verse, 58. Desires and?
We have a quota of desires and ego. So what are the reminders that we should tell ourselves every day so that we don't go off track?
Yes, we all have desire and ego, which determine our spiritual level. Now her question is, what is it that we should do every day to make sure that we keep away from this? Or at least don't increase. Thought of the higher. So that's what we were discussing. You're thinking of body, mind, intellect all the time. That's where our investment is. You become the body, mind and intellect. So there should be a movement towards the higher. Now if you tell yourself, don't think of body, you will 100% think of body. So what must you think of? You must get inspired with something else. Something higher. It's like a child. No parent will ever tell the child, don't play with toys. But every parent is keen on introducing the child to something higher, something more fulfilling. So you buy the child a bicycle and the child is so thrilled trying to balance himself on the bicycle, then what happens? Toys drop. So like that, you have to find a higher thing that excites you, that interests you, that you have a passion for in the field of your Swadharma. Right? So in every vocation, in every career path, you can find the higher. If you're a journalist, you can say, oh, I want to introduce my readers to something more meaningful instead of the rubbish that comes out now. If you're a doctor, say, I want to give my patients my best. If you're a manufacturer, I want to do the best for my customer. So there's always a higher that you can work for. And once you get established in that, you're not thinking of body, mind, your own self, or your desires, or your ego. And that wanes. But the problem is that higher doesn't occur to us only. There are people who have achieved great heights from the worldly standpoint. You talk to them about the higher, they just don't understand. They say, I don't know what you're talking about. And yet, on the other hand, you talk to an ordinary peon about the higher and he gets excited. It's amazing. But and the best time to get people to identify with the higher is the youth. You take anybody, teenagers and early 20s, that's the time to get to them. How do we know that? Like this, the business of education is all about high fees, and then you take tuitions, and it's all about marks, and in the midst of that, suddenly you find one rare teacher, true teacher, who doesn't talk about the subject, but he talks about having a vision. He talks about what's going on in your mind. He talks about what do you say to yourself. He inspires these kids. And I know one particular teacher whose student, who used to teach a person 10 years back. That person is now working, is a full-grown adult. And he met me the other day and he says, oh, he was my best teacher. Because of him, I started liking the subject. So education is not about teaching math or science or geography or history. That is, you forget the moment the exam is over. You never forget an inspired teacher. And that is it. You never forget, it could be a car mechanic who's inspired. You never forget a doctor who thinks differently. I met with a doctor recently. What a fine specimen of humanity she was. Very rarely you find such people. But these are the people who keep the whole world going. The rest of us are. So that's what it is. Next verse, 58.
यदा संहरते चायं कूर्मोऽङ्गानीव शर्वशः इन्द्रियाणीन्द्रियार्थेभ्यः तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता.
Tasya prajna pratishtita. One is established in wisdom when one restrains one's sense organs from their sense objects. Like the tortoise, which pulls back its limbs from all sides. So the tortoise, incidentally, is one of the avatars of Lord Vishnu. But here he gives the example of the tortoise to explain, to answer the question, Kim Prabhasheta, how does he speak? Means, how does the infinite express through the finite? And speech is such a poor container of the spirit. With words, what can you express? Even if you want to, let's say you went out somewhere and ate a particular dish. and you want to convey to a person who's never eaten that how tasty it is. Like, oh, I don't know, Shrikhand. Huh? How will you explain it? You want to try? It's difficult, no? And yet it is an object. Then you come to love. How do you express love? Words fail. That is why you see these couples on Marine Drive sitting there. They don't talk, there is silence. If they talk, it is fake. When you really love, when a mother loves her child, how does she express it? She doesn't use words, she uses, I don't know what. She says things which nobody can understand. Neither the mother understands nor the child, but the love conveys. Right? Then intellectual ideas, though, it's all in formulae. Huh? The spirit, here he is talking about the spirit. How do you convey? How does the infinite express through the finite? And yet, he's done such a magnificent job that our hair stands on end if you're really inspired. And there is a change. A transformation takes place in us. For generations, thousands of centuries, this has been going on. And we are the lucky recipients of this fantastic knowledge. What are we doing about it? It's like gold on a donkey's back. At best, we say, the maximum we'll say, today's class was very good. By the time you reach downstairs, it's gone, evaporated. So there must be the action. This must be followed by action. What action? You must decide what action. Go home and talk to your family members. Send a WhatsApp to your friends and say, this is what is happening here, come. I don't see this happening. The handful of people who are coming here, spread the word. Please don't get me wrong, I am not talking about the numbers. You know why? Because you go back to the greatest of people, realized souls. Swami Ramatirtha had 2 disciples. So what are you talking about? Swami Vivekananda had a handful of disciples. Sri Ramakrishna never left that temple in all his life, he didn't leave. So what disciples? So it's not about that. It's not about numbers. It's about when you gain access to something that is invaluable. If you don't have the urge to share it with your loved ones, there's something clinically wrong with you. Don't you think so? Share it. At least give it to your children. In some way. Anyway, so how does the infinite express? Now the tortoise is equated to a realized soul. The tortoise has 6 appendages. The appendages is like the 5 senses and the mind of the human being. And then the tortoise has a shell on top. That shell is equated to the intellect. The shell is exposed to the sun above. Sun represents Atman. Now what the tortoise does is, it moves about carefully but freely. But the moment it senses danger, that something is going wrong, it quickly withdraws all its appendages under the safe cover of the intellect. And then you can do what you like with the tortoise, nothing will happen to it because the shell is hard. Similarly, he is recommending to us what we must do is not retreat in fear. You're a human being. You're the master of the universe. Go out and meet with the world. You should never not do something out of fear. But your intellect must always be alert, and the moment you sense danger of getting attached, danger of getting involved, danger of a sense object overwhelming you, you quickly withdraw. All five senses and mind under the safe cover of the intellect, which is always in communion with the higher Atman. Then you're safe. So the Sthita Prajna, a perfected individual, is one who's constantly absorbed in the self. Intellect is constantly absorbed in the self, while the mind and the senses are interacting with the world freely. And look at this. This is a description of a realized soul given by Lord Krishna himself. An avatar means realized at birth. And what is our notion of a realized person? Hare, he's a spiritual person, he can't go watch movies. He's a spiritual person, he can't go to a restaurant and eat. He's a spiritual person, he can't listen to music. If he goes to Coldplay concert, you'll say, Hare, what kind of spiritual person is he? What strange notions we have. I'm not suggesting you should go to Coldplay concert, please. I'm not an agent for him. That's not the point. The point is, you should not be afraid of the world. You get it? Normal, everyday actions should always be there. But the moment you sense, like sometimes you're working with a person all the time and you tend to get attached. So when you sense that danger, withdraw. Let's say you like sweets, you have a particular preference for sweets, and then you end up eating sweets every day after every meal, and and then you start missing it. I wish there was chocolate. That's a danger sign. Withdraw. Particularly when it comes to alcohol, how soon you get dependent on it. I know a gentleman who used to drink over the weekend. He used to drink only when he had company, not alone. And then slowly it became every day he would drink, even when he was alone. That's when I said, this is danger. Because it means you're getting dependent. So tell yourself, that's the point where you should withdraw. Otherwise, you get stuck. So here you should transact freely with the world. But perception, make sure you don't get neutralized. Meaning that your joy content should not keep diminishing every time you contact that object. Emotions, you must deal with people or interact with people with love, affection, but without attachment. You must feel, not get emotional. Think, not get involved. So there are 2 points here. Enjoy the world freely, but when you sense danger, withdraw. Okay? Sorry, I've taken 5 more minutes, but we end with a prayer.
पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते